Nena has been married to her husband, Obinna, for 4 years, and they have been together for 6 years. This is the first major argument they've ever had. Nena, who is 24 years old, is currently 33 weeks pregnant with Obinna's baby, who is 31 years old. When Nena was 20 weeks pregnant, her doctor told her she had a condition called placenta previa. This means that the placenta is covering the opening of her cervix. The doctor said the placenta might move as the baby grows, but it didn't, so Nena was scheduled for a C-section in just 3 weeks. At 20 weeks, Nena was given light restrictions. By 30 weeks, the restrictions became stricter. She wasn't allowed to run, lift, climb, stand for longer than 3 hours at a time, and most importantly, no sex and no vaginal exams. The doctor told her these restrictions were necessary to avoid any bleeding that could lead to a preterm birth. For 3 weeks, Nena followed these instructions, but Obinna was finding it very difficult to cope. Every single day, he kept asking her for sex, and every single day, she reminded him of the restrictions. Nena didn't even want to have sex because her belly was big, and she was always tired. Obinna wasn't happy with her response. One day, Obinna told Nena that sometimes doctors exaggerate things to protect their careers and earn more money. He claimed they push for C-sections. Nena didn't argue, but knew she had to follow the doctor's orders because of her condition. Obinna wasn't satisfied with this answer, and eventually, they ended up having sex. A few hours later, Nena started bleeding heavily. She was so scared that she cried in the bathroom, unsure of what to do. She called her doctor, who asked her to come to the hospital immediately. On the way there, Nena was crying, imagining she would have to undergo a C-section for her baby, who was only 33 weeks old. At the hospital, the doctor confirmed Nena was not in preterm labor. She was just bleeding, and as long as it stopped, she would be fine, which it did. But while they were there, the doctor asked Obinna to step out and then questioned Nena. The doctor asked if Nena had done anything she was told not to do. The doctor assured her she wasn't accusing her, but just wanted to understand what caused the bleeding. Nena admitted that they had sex. The doctor went over the restrictions again and gave Nena some information about domestic violence, putting the pamphlets in her purse. Nena felt so embarrassed. When they got back to the car, Nena broke down and yelled at Obinna, telling him never to do that to her again. She also reminded him that the doctor knows what's best for her and the baby. Obinna apologized sincerely, but Nena was still upset for days. Obinna kept apologizing, asking how long she would make him apologize. Nena told him at least until the baby was born. Nena clarified that she was out of secondary school and in university when they met and started dating. Her family lives in another state, but they visit often. She had skimmed through the pamphlets the doctor gave her, but later noticed they were missing. She assumed Obinna had gone through some papers and mistakenly threw them out, not on purpose. Nena was reading through the comments on her situation, and she saw a lot of advice from people. She even searched their recycling bin for the pamphlets her doctor gave her, but they were gone. Someone asked if her husband, Obinna, lacked critical thinking skills and wondered how he could hold a job. Nena responded that Obinna usually doesn't lack such skills because he's a police detective. Nena wasn't planning to give an update, as she didn't want people in her real life to find out about her personal issues. However, the thoughtful comments she received made her change her mind. She posted her story about 7 hours ago and was surprised by how many people responded. She felt grateful for the support from strangers online. Initially, Nena planned to talk to her doctor and maybe her sister-in-law, but she was hesitant because she didn't want to discuss those personal details. She rescheduled her weekly appointment with her doctor for tomorrow. Some commenters suggested she could walk into the doctor's office without an appointment, but Nena didn't want to have to make excuses to her husband. The comments made her realize the severity of the situation, and she became terrified. Nena called her sister-in-law after work, and they had a long conversation. Nena mentioned in the comments that her sister-in-law and brother never really liked her husband, especially her sister-in-law. During their conversation, Nena admitted that what happened wasn't just sex but rape. They talked about this more than anything else, and her sister-in-law quickly cleared up any confusion. Nena also shared things her mother had excused because her mom liked Obinna, and her sister-in-law was livid. Nena had always known her sister-in-law would react this way, which is why she never told her before. Her sister-in-law told her to talk to her doctor, and said she would talk to Nena's brother to see what they could do. Her sister-in-law promised to come down on the soonest flight, but her brother couldn't come yet because they have their own children to care for. Nena was content with that, and her appointment with her doctor was scheduled for the next day. When Obinna came home early, he noticed Nena was upset. She had planned to pull herself together before he returned, but she didn't have enough time. She wasn't going to tell him anything, but he was being unusually kind and concerned. Nena explained that he usually is kind, even though it might be hard for others to believe. But today, he was especially kind and worried about her. She knew it was a mistake to explain the situation, but she did it anyway because she was used to sharing her problems with him. Nena told Obinna how he had hurt her, and that she was scared. She explained that by forcing her to have sex and literally forcing her legs apart, he had hurt her. Obinna was shocked and defensive, telling her not to say such things because it's a crime. He asked if she understood that she was accusing him of marital rape. Nena tried to apologize, but Obinna started treating her like she was dumb again. However, Nena finally stood her ground and said she understood now that it was marital rape. This led to another huge argument. Obinna called her an idiot for daring to say those words, and Nena called him an abuser. Obinna laughed and dismissed her, saying she didn't know what she was talking about. He argued that having sex with his wife isn't rape, no matter how one tries to explain it. Nena tried to walk away, but Obinna grabbed her wrist. She pulled her hand away, and he sarcastically apologized, saying that might be considered battery of a pregnant woman according to her definitions. His condescending tone pushed Nena over the edge, and she told him she didn't want to be around him anymore. Obinna said fine, he would leave, but Nena insisted she wanted to leave instead. Obinna threw a credit card at her and told her to get a hotel, so she did. Now, Nena was in a hotel room, typing her update. Her sister-in-law was on her way, but Nena was far from okay. Obinna had called her several times, but she didn't answer. She had never seen him that angry before, and she was worried about what he might do if she told him she genuinely wanted to leave and take the baby. Obinna was the one who wanted a child, and Nena was afraid he wouldn't let her take the baby's sister-in-law, which terrified her. Every time her baby kicked, Nena felt like crying because she was so scared. Someone warned Nena that Obinna could track her location using the credit card and ask for information on her behalf. Nena acknowledged this but mentioned that she had explained the situation to the hotel staff, and they seemed to understand. The hotel manager assured her that they couldn't legally disclose her location or room number, even if Obinna tried to use his police authority. Another commenter suggested that Nena move in with her brother and sister-in-law, have the baby at a hospital near them, and get away from Obinna before he could make her life difficult. Nena agreed with this plan but was terrified because she had been bleeding and experiencing Braxton Hicks contractions for the first time. She was scared to be alone or to go into preterm labor alone. Nena was trying hard not to engage with her husband, but she was so scared. She also considered the possibility of her post going viral and Obinna finding it, but she didn't think either of them would discover it. Even if they did, she didn't believe she had shared anything too specific. Someone else commented that it must be terrifying for her to realize that someone she loved and thought loved her back had shown his true colors when she tried to stand up for herself. Nena was in disbelief at how quickly Obinna's demeanor had changed. The moment she said something he didn't like, he became meaner and more cruel than she had ever seen him before. One commenter suggested she should consult a lawyer, as a lawyer would know how to report the situation in a way that couldn't be swept under the rug. Nena reassured the commenter that she was already taking those steps. She wanted to have her daughter in her home state, but was unsure how to go about it. She was scared of making a mistake that could give Obinna leverage to take their daughter. Nena was doing her best but was stressed and scared, knowing she had less than 3 weeks to find safety. She also worried that Obinna would never allow her to have the baby or undergo a C-section alone. He would insist on being there, and she didn't know how to handle that. Nena then shared a quick update for those concerned about her well-being. She expressed her deep gratitude for the overwhelming support she received. On August 7th, after posting her previous update, she was urged by commenters to go to the hospital due to experiencing Braxton Hicks contractions for the first time. At first, she wasn't going to go, but thankfully she did. By the time she arrived at the hospital, she was bleeding so heavily that it ran down her legs. It turned out she had suffered a placental abruption. Later that night, at 10:37 p.m., Nena gave birth to her daughter via emergency C-section. Her baby girl was born at just 33 weeks and 5 days, tiny but doing relatively well, according to the doctors. Nena remained in the hospital, receiving care, while her daughter was in the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU. Despite the fear and challenges, seeing her daughter made everything better. The nurses were amazing, and the doctor assured her that as long as everything continued to go well, she could take her daughter home in a few weeks. Nena's sister-in-law arrived shortly after the baby was born and had been by her side, offering constant support. The attorney advised Nena to allow Obinna visitation with their daughter while she was still in the NICU, so Nena agreed. She didn't have concerns about Obinna hurting their daughter while in the hospital, and she received many supportive messages from Obinna's co-workers and his side of the family. It was clear that Obinna was trying to spin the story that they were still together and that everything was fine. Obinna visited their daughter several times that day, and Nena believed he was present in the hospital during the C-section, although she wasn't entirely sure. That morning, while the nurses were helping her take her first walk after the surgery, Obinna came to her room. Nena was emotional and, in a moment of vulnerability, allowed him in. She let him comfort her and even cried in his arms. But when Obinna remarked, "You wouldn't have had to do this alone if you weren't acting that way," and then grabbed her face to force a kiss, Nena was reminded of exactly why she was taking these steps to leave him. Nena was unsure of her next move. Initially, she wanted to have her daughter in her home state and stay there with her sister-in-law and brother. But she doubted Obinna would allow her to take their daughter there. Her attorney assured her that she had options, and they were heavily in her favor. Nena had followed the advice from the online community and obtained medical records documenting the rapes, including the one she posted about and 2 others for which she had gone to the hospital over the years. Her doctor also provided a statement that the placental abruption was likely caused by trauma and stress, which would support her case for custody, but only in the area where they currently lived. Despite everything, Nena found solace in being able to briefly hold her baby. The love she felt for her daughter replaced almost all other thoughts in her mind. Above all, she wanted her daughter to be safe. Nena vowed not to do anything that would put her baby in the situation she had been in. At just 16 hours old, her daughter was already Nena's entire world, and she knew she would be for the rest of her life. Nena ended her update by expressing that she probably wouldn't update again, as she hoped to spend more time with her daughter soon. She thanked everyone once again, acknowledging that the support from the online community had literally changed her life. Nena wanted to share a message for anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation. Do not be scared to speak up. And to anyone who has survived something like this, you are so brave. Thank you. One commenter suggested that Nena should ask her nurse to connect her with a social worker, especially given that her baby was in the NICU. The commenter pointed out that depending on the state, a social worker could be an invaluable resource, helping Nena connect with shelters that are suitable for new moms and NICU babies. Nena responded that she already had a plan in place for when her daughter was released from the NICU. She also reassured everyone who was worried about her financial situation, explaining that she still had a stable job, a career, and significant savings. She had never allowed Obinna to take control of her finances or her daughter's future. When asked how long her sister-in-law would be staying with her, Nena explained that they weren't sure yet. Her sister-in-law also had children back home, but she promised that either she or Nena's brother would be with her for as long as needed, taking turns to support her. Nena described them as her angels. One commenter pointed out the disturbing fact that Obinna had been in the surgical theater during the C-section, was visiting her within a day, and even walked her around the unit. The commenter was concerned that Obinna believed they were still together, especially given the messages from his friends and family. Nena clarified that the hospital had called Obinna before she could stop them, but at the time, it wasn't her biggest concern since she had been dealing with a significant amount of blood loss. Another commenter asked why Obinna had touched her stomach and whether he had intentionally hurt her incision. Nena explained that when Obinna realized it hurt, he quickly pulled his hand back and apologized, saying he had forgotten. He was used to touching her tummy when she was pregnant, but she wasn't sure whether the apology was genuine, given his history of hurting her. Nena also addressed a commenter who reminded her that she was only in this position, having an emergency C-section and watching her child fight for survival in the NICU, because Obinna had raped her, disregarding the risk to her and their unborn child. The commenter urged Nena to keep Obinna away from her. Nena agreed wholeheartedly, saying that every time she saw or thought about her daughter, she was reminded of how Obinna's actions had led to this. During the C-section, they had taken her daughter away so quickly that Nena thought she was dead or dying, and she knew it was entirely Obina's fault. She assured the commenter that she would not go back to him. Another commenter expressed surprise that Nena had mentioned other instances of rape, as her original post made it seem like this was an isolated incident. The commenter was relieved that Nena was getting out and encouraged her to share this information with her lawyer. Nena confirmed that she had already informed her lawyer, who said it was fine as long as she didn't reveal any names or specific details that weren't already accessible on the internet. In her final thoughts, Nena acknowledged that she should have left when she was 19, the first time Obina hurt her. But she hadn't. Now, however, she was determined to leave because it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about her daughter too.